Why do I say frequently in my videos that you shouldn't believe me? This probably sounds quite paradoxical to hear me say that. You know, you listening to me, it's like you're listening to me sharing knowledge, and at the same time, I'm saying, don't believe me. I've said before that I'm not sharing my knowledge. You might perceive this as knowledge or my knowledge, but I don't regard this as being my knowledge. I see myself, in fact, as not having any knowledge. I use knowledge, but I don't have any. But that's another subject. Why do I say don't believe me? If you are kind of on this spiritual path, you may have been on it for some time, you will have come across so many people by now, or you're likely to have, that want you to believe in what they're saying. They want you to believe them. They want you to believe in something in order to experience something or to see something, and so on and so on. There's all these different areas and avenues where belief is essential, just like religion. In religion, belief is essential. But then here I am saying, don't believe me. Maybe this is a path that I'm walking on my own. Maybe it is. Maybe you've come across somebody else who's saying the same thing. I certainly haven't. But I know that, in my view, anyway, certainly in my view, belief is like an investment of energy. Okay? One of the things that I came across, I remember I bought a book some time ago by Wayne Dyer, Dr. Wayne Dyer. And something that he wrote in this book, and it's a book just like most of the books that I've bought in, related to spirituality. I've never read them. I've read bits and pieces, but never read the whole books. But there was something in this book by Wayne Dyer that basically he said, believing is seeing. And we are, as he put it, if I remember rightly, we are conditioned to think that seeing is believing. So people say, I believe that when I see it, sort of thing. But as he says, it's actually the other way around. And if you believe it, then you will see it. So what this means is that if you believe something with enough kind of intensity, passion or whatever, then you will manifest it. Okay. And in reality, again, if you've been on this kind of spiritual path for long enough or for any length of time, one of the things that you will have come across is manifestation and the kind of art of manifestation. And the basis of your manifesting is belief. Okay. So you have to believe that you already have something in order to receive it, this kind of thing. So I'm saying to you, don't believe me, purely because, if you believe what I'm saying, right, then you will begin to manifest, or it's likely that you will begin to manifest things in accordance with what you believe. But the whole sort of focus of spirituality, again, in my view, is to get to the root of this, of everything, to get to the root. And we can't get to the root if we have a head full of beliefs. So part of the process is to empty your mind of beliefs. So if I'm saying things to you, it's like how I approach literature, and if I'm reading books or whatever, if I've ever watched videos and stuff related to spirituality or whatever, then I'm not watching or listening or reading to believe. My purpose or my aim, I suppose, is to see if I can see what is being spoken about. Okay, so if I want to believe, then all I'm trying to do basically is consume all this information. I'm trying to take it on board. I'm trying to hold on to it. But in reality, the spiritual mind wants to let go. So the ego mind wants to hold on. The spiritual mind wants to let go. And what you see in a lot of, this, it's sort of labeled under this banner of spirituality, is everybody wants to be something. People want to be healers. People want to be psychics, mediums, clairvoyants, and all of these kind of things. People want to be empaths and telepathic, and so many different things that people want to be in terms of sort of reinforcing this spiritual identity. But certainly, as I see spirituality, the aim of spirituality is to rid yourself of all of that. Is to rid yourself of the belief that you have to be anything of the sort. Because all we are doing in pursuing all of these things, these identities, even the label of spirituality, we are effectively trying to use it as a bit of an identity to attract people so that people can see us in a different sort of way. But the sort of aim, as I see spirituality, is to be rid of all of this. And I've spoken before, and you will hear me say it on various occasions when I refer to the Bible. Not that I'm biblical and I've studied the Bible and I'm I have that kind of religious intention or whatever, but I see the Bible as being a book of guidance to some extent. It's a story that contains little nuggets here and there, and I think you have to dismiss the story, because ultimately it is all about learning about you and who you are. And the Garden of Eden basically shows us what happens when we allow ourselves to be consumed by knowledge. Ultimately, we then decide that knowledge is more important than who we are. So we want to give ourselves this identity, which is basically knowledge. Everything that you can tell me about yourself now is words, it's knowledge, it's information. So who are you beneath all of that? And there are so many layers to identity, so many different layers. Like, you might be a parent, you might be a sibling, you might be a grandparent, you might be an employee, you might be retired, you might be disabled, you might be a sports person, you might be a construction worker. The list is endless. If you look at yourself now, what you regard as being yourself, you will see that there are so many things that you have associated with who you are. But it's all psychological. And if you remove all of those layers, these psychological layers of who you are, what remains? How do you define yourself when you have removed all of these layers of identity? To me, that is actually the flowering of spirituality, because it's like, then arises the question, who am I? Who am I? And it's clear that you are a kind of an entity, a living entity. It's clear that you are conscious enough to know this. But when you remove all of these psychological identities, what remains? What actually remains? And this is like a doorway that you are opening, a doorway of self-discovery or self-understanding. And this, to me, is what actually, should I say, what self-knowledge is. It's to know exactly what, we refer to as the self, which is all of these layers of identity. Once you get past all of these layers of identity, what remains? And you will probably come across in some circles related to spirituality where they say that all that remains is the self. But again, this requires understanding, and it requires you to be able to actually see what this means, as opposed to just taking on board information, memorizing this information so that you can regurgitate it later and appear to be knowledgeable, appear to be this person that knows. Because again, that is another identity that's kind of sort of taking shape within you. So one of the things that I also, want to bring up in this little video is, I've said before that the spiritual mind, you have the spiritual mind and the ego mind. The ego mind is the mind that believes all of these different things, okay? The spiritual mind is the mind that's kind of devoid of all these beliefs. The mind that's delved into the unknown, beneath this layer of all of these beliefs and identities and ideals and images and so on, that delves deeper into this unknown kind of territory, okay? But then also, what I've also said is the spiritual awakening is a continuous awakening. It's a continuous unfolding. For somebody to say, I am awake, I am spiritually awake or whatever, this is purely, in my view, delusional. It's basically the ego mind trying to shape for itself a new identity, basically because it's learned a few things, so now it thinks of itself in a different way. But as I see spiritual awakening, it's a continual awakening, it's a continual unfolding. It's a continual now experience. Every now experience is like awakening, okay? But then also, the spiritual mind is the most gullible mind. And what I mean by that is, it's so easy for the spiritual mind to be hooked by the ego. So easy for the spiritual mind to be hooked by the ego. It's so easy for the spiritual mind to fall back into this kind of cycle of beliefs and belief systems. So easy. So the reason why I'm saying it's the gullible mind is like the infant mind. The infant mind is kind of attuned to the spiritual mind, because the infant mind, this is the infant prior to having an identity. So it might be the infant that hasn't learned to walk or talk or anything like this. So they're just kind of looking around the room and learning from their environment. This infant mind doesn't have an identity, but then it's the infant mind that then falls susceptible to conditioning, because it is gullible, it's open, it's free to all of these potential kind of viral attacks from within the environment. So the spiritual mind is also quite gullible, which is why awakening is a continual process, because each moment is like a potential for the spiritual mind to fall back into the grasp of the ego. So there is like a constant attention, a constant alertness that's necessary to, in order for that to not happen.